Greetings fellow Mist Wanderers, my name is Steve Morgan and this is DM of the Mists, covering all things Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. The last video I put out was my spoiler light version of my review for the recent Ravenloft novel Heir of Strahd. Let me show it to you on my Kindle device. There it is, and then if I go back a few, you can see the cover as well. This is the second version of the video I've done. So the first one was the spoiler light version. If you've seen this and then you're watching this, there may be a bit of repetition in the intro, as I'm pretty much going to say some of the same stuff I said, because this could be the first version you've seen and then you miss the other stuff. So if you have already seen the other version and you want to skip all the info where I talk about, I didn't get a free copy and stuff like that, feel free to look in the time bar, or the description has got timestamps for like review start or some wording like that, and jump ahead to get to the proper meat and bones of this video. So just to reiterate, this is the spoiler-filled version of the video. If you don't want spoilers, I made a spoiler light video and published it a few days or a week ago, depending on when this comes out versus that one, because I'm recording at the same time. That's kind of the back of the book blurb and vague info version of this video. So if you don't want any spoilers at all, click off this one, go on that one, is what I can recommend. As this is the spoiler-filled version, this is full of spoilers. It assumes you've read the book, or you don't plan to, you don't mind about spoilers. I can geek out, I can talk about what locations and characters appear, and things like that. And of course, it also contains spoilers for Curse of Strahd, if that's an issue. So I'm going to repeat some stuff I said in the spoiler-light version. I come at this from the angle of not being a book reviewer. I am a Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft and D&D fan. However, I have read almost all of the old Ravenloft novels, and some of the recent D&D novels, including the Honor Among Thieves movie tie-in novels, well, the first Fallbacks novel, I think the second one's out soon. So I kind of come at this from various angles of like old school Ravenloft, while also recent non-Ravenloft D&D. And I guess I was a bit more optimistic than some other people, because I enjoyed some of the recent non-Ravenloft D&D novels and kind of thought, maybe give this novel more of a chance than other people. I also watched and listened to some interviews with the author before reading. If I remember, I'll leave some links in the description. There was a really cool thing she said where, and I don't know if she knew that Tracy Hickman, the inventor of Strahd, said the same thing at a convention. Tracy Hickman said that vampires don't sparkle. He's like saying, referencing Twilight. And she actually said the same thing, because I think there was one of the interviews, she's asked if it's going to be like Twilight style, and she's like, nah, that's not what this is like. She also talks about how things like Strahd and Vampire of the Mist and other Ravenloft novels were kind of like inspiration for hers, which is quite cool. So she obviously wanted to be quite considerate of the old lore. For transparency's sake, there's no paid promotion. I didn't get a free copy to review. I had to pay using my own money. Funnily enough, I did request my own copy. I approached Random House through the proper channels and said, I've got a YouTube channel that's dedicated to just Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft. I'd love a free copy. And got completely ignored. Didn't get a reply, didn't get anything through. It kind of stung a bit seeing that a TikTok Strahd influencer got a free copy, offered like months ago as well. I'm not jealous. I'm not jealous. Seriously though, if Random House and or Wizards of the Coast are watching, I'm doing 4 videos about this book alone. Send me some stuff, basically. I will do it justice and do you right, I'm sure. And also, and I mentioned this in the spoiler light version, if you are a member of Spotify Premium, I believe you get access to Heir of Strahd for free. I wasn't too keen on the narrator, but I only listened to the excerpt, so see what you think. I'm going to start off saying what I said in the spoiler light video, and then I'm going to get to the sort of more spoilery stuff. I liked the book. I didn't love it. It's not my favourite new book of all time. I actually preferred The Road to Neverwinter, the Honor Among Thieves tie-in novel. But I didn't hate it. I would give it in the region of a 7 or an 8 out of 10, so like a 3.5 to 4 stars rating. I liked the author's writing style, had a good mix of humour and good characterization of some, if not all, but some of the characters. I'll talk in a minute about who my favourite characters were out of the main party of 5. And I liked as well how each chapter is a different perspective of a different character, and I felt like the transitions were seamless. So say if one chapter ended on one person's perspective and it was a cliffhanger, and then it carried on from another character's perspective, I thought that worked really well. My favourite character without a doubt was Chivarian, the Drow Barbarian, with the Tressim, which I'd never come across Tressims until now, until this novel, and like cats with bat wings, they sound amazing. How did I not know about them until now? And then Alishai, I believe that's how you pronounce her name, who is the Tiefling Paladin, and then Ka, the Kenku Cleric. Let's talk about that cover before we move on. Again, if you've seen the spoiler light version, I'm repeating myself a bit here, I'm sorry. I will get to a point where there's like a good 5-10 minutes where I just talk about stuff that isn't in the other video. One of the criticisms I saw of the cover from people before the book came out was it looked too cheery, it looked too colourful, the characters looked too happy. And my view, and I talked about this in my prediction video that I released a few months ago, is they're fresh off the boat. This is the party when they've just arrived into Barovia. And they just walked out in the mists, and they're like, yeah, we can take on anything. Although in the novel, it's not like that at all. I don't even see them as cheery in the introduction. They're just kind of all paranoid and untrusting. I wondered if the cover was a red herring. I mean, you could argue that the cover might have put people off. It's a difficult one. Did it put off more or less people? Because it would have put off people who thought the cover was too cheery, but then there might be people who saw the cover and liked it. Maybe more of the target audience, I don't know. And then maybe more people have ended up buying it because of the cover. So it's a weird one. It's not as straightforward as to say the cover is terrible. You know, I'm not a book cover designer, so I can't comment on what makes a good or bad cover. You know, some people think, oh, they did a terrible job, but maybe they did it with certain things in mind, I don't know. What's interesting is this is a very party-focused looking novel with the 5 characters on the front. With old Ravenloft, it was often one character's perspective, and of course, with the Heir of Strahd novels, it was Strahd's potentially biased perspective. But, I don't know, the old novels made me feel that they were kind of like more DMs only. This kind of gives me a feel, it's more like a PC feel, player character feel, and that maybe this is kind of for players as well as DMs, people who want to, you know, see what Ravenloft is like, and then in the future they might say, hey, I want to play Curse of Strahd now. There was also talk about the races and species of the characters, and that they were a really weird, odd mix. But then 3 of them, or at least in 2014 rules, are core. You've got human, elf, tiefling. Kenku is a cool choice because of the were-raven link. I meant to say, I had a theory that, and it gets proved in the book, that someone would mistake her for a were-raven, and that does happen, so I was pretty sure about that. I wish I'd written that down somewhere so I could be like, see, I told you. And then there was the orc wizard, not your half orc, which is a core race, but full orc wizard. I think people were like, oh, that's really weird, which, you know, I think there's probably some Curse of Strahd campaigns that have much weirder party race species mixes than what's on the cover of this book, let's be fair. I thought the level of the gore description was good. It's not over the top, but it's more than in some of the D&D novels, especially the recent ones. Felt more horror-like. I felt for the most part I liked how faithful it was to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft, mostly. For example, when they were walking through Castle Ravenloft, you could almost picture the map in your head and be like, they go up some stairs to the left and they're in this room, they go up this spiral staircase and arrive here. I did see in one of the interviews the author needed to add more guest rooms. She needed more than one, so she added some more, presumably with Wizards of the Coast's permission, not changing too much. I did notice in one point in the book there's a line that says one room was hastily converted into a bedroom, so maybe like the room by the witches or something was converted into a bedroom, and therefore, you know, that's how they accounted for it. I like the intro, the 5 strangers spirited away, nobody knows each other. I get a feeling that a lot of D&D campaigns start off where everyone knows each other, or at least they know each other before they arrive, not just suddenly they arrive and then they wake up and they're like, who are you, and who are you, and who are you? So I like that angle where they wake up and nobody knows nobody else. I thought that was very interesting and unique, I guess. I'd be interested to know if DMs have run it that way. Feel free to leave a comment. Their first encounter is at an old butcher's shop or just outside the village of Barovia with a zombie and boneless reflavoured as pigs. I thought that was a great idea. That's cool. I want boneless pigs now. After that battle, which I felt was... on first read, I felt like it was a bit sort of all over the place and rushed, and you know, the pacing was weird. But then on my second read, I don't know, it felt better. But then somebody says, welcome to Barovia, and I was like, that's Strahd. And then they started describing it. I was like, that's not Strahd, that's Rahadin. I was like, oh my god, Rahadin. That's so cool. We got Rahadin introduced. They arrive at Castle Ravenloft. Obviously, I talked about this a minute ago. And then the layout, like they walk in and like they see the dragon statues and they see the gargoyle statues and they turn right and right again and there's the dining hall. I loved that. I just thought that was really cool how it was like, you know, picturing it in your head, especially someone like me who's run Curse of Strahd and run Castle Ravenloft, and so that I've got almost a blueprint of the map in my head. Before I ran Castle Ravenloft, I didn't know it super well. So I imagine if you're in the middle of running Curse of Strahd, you might not necessarily know it that well. And a number of key locations are shown, such as the dining hall, the study. Later on there's the King and Queen's crypts and the catacombs as a whole, and the chapel. I liked how there were things straight out of Curse of Strahd. There's 2 times where the corridor with the statues near the study, where if you talk to a statue it responds, and they were like, what? I thought that was great. And the blood-filled bath just off the study as well. That the monster, it's not actually technically a monster that's fought. It's almost like an illusion or a sort of weird trick or whatever. I'm going through all the spoilers now, kind of. My notes were kind of like, as I was reading it, I was like, oh my god, make a note of this thing. And you'll probably see, this is mostly chronological with what happens. I like the introduction of they introduced a Grimishka, which is from Van Richten's guide, the cat bat, as it's described, the Drow barbarian fights. Later on, Ludmilla and Anastasia are introduced as wolves. I thought that was an interesting thing. I don't know if they were polymorphed. I don't know if it was just a nod to the consorts, their names, and is it Strahd's pet wolves and you name them after the consorts. But Escher did appear just before that as well, and skittered away. I think that's in Curse of Strahd, where it says if you attack him, he jumps out the window and runs away. So I like that was true to the thing, although I did read a review somewhere where someone thought that was really weird. But I just thought it was funny weird. Like, even Shivarian, who encounters him, is just like, that guy is weird. What a weird thing to do. One thing that kind of bugged me, but I think it's addressed shortly afterwards, is they kept splitting up. Like, they're nearly... Yeah, fair enough when they first arrive at the castle and they split up and they're all wandering around and bad things happen to them and they get together and they talk about it. And then they split up again. What are you doing? Why are you splitting up so much? You know, it's... And then I think the next day they're like, yeah, we shouldn't split up anymore. But I just thought it was really bizarre. It was after the witch. So there's like a naked witch or something that nearly kills 2 of the characters, and then they're just saved in time, and they're still splitting up. But then again, it makes for good horror, because safety in numbers, and each time one of them is on their own, something scary happens to them, and it's the whole isolation is very horror-centric. So you know, I feel like the author balanced that well, and then the fact that they then realise, yeah, we shouldn't separate anymore. I'm glad they addressed that. About halfway in, one of them encounters a creature that sounds like it's described as a carrionet, but it also reminded me of the living doll from the Witchlight book. So I don't know which one it was. Maybe it was kind of like a carrionet. Oh, it had a silver needle, I think, so probably the carrionet. It's about halfway through the book that there's 2 big exposition drops. One of them from Strahd, talking about his jealousy for his brother Sergei, which kind of just came out of nowhere and felt a bit like a massive exposition drop. But I do like how his version is different to when Fiel, her name is, discovers the home of Strahd later and reads it for herself. And then the other 4 characters meet Dr. Rudolf van Richten, and he tells them all about Domains of Dread and the Mists and Barovia and Strahd and you know, it kind of worked because he's like almost like an excited, you know, happy to tell them everything and try and help them out and bring them up to speed kind of thing. But it just kind of just felt like an exposition drop, like boom. And it was a bit like, whoa. Like, I found it a bit like sort of head spinning, and I imagine if someone's reading it who doesn't know those things and doesn't know their Ravenloft or Curse of Strahd lore would be like, what did I just read? What is all this? What's going on? I liked how... I'll probably talk about this near the end. I was disappointed more locations didn't come up beyond Village of Barovia. This is in Barovia now. Village of Barovia, Castle Ravenloft, and Selenka Pass. But I did like that Selenka Pass was introduced. And Larissa Snowmain, who I recently did a video about as well. She appears in Van Richten's guide. She was the not the author, the protagonist of Dance of the Dead, and I think she's a great character. And I squeed when I saw her name in the book, and her boat, her paddleboat, riverboat, was mentioned as well. And then in order to get to the Selenka Pass, they go to the teleportation brazier. And I meant to make a note and check this. I made a note that it was a violet. While it loads, I didn't finish that thought. It was a violet stone, and threw it into the teleportation brazier, and then they ended up on Selenka Pass. Is it true to the book? Yes. Violet leads to the mountain spire. Violet is Selenka Pass. That's cool. So even like the paying attention to the detail of like which colour stone, throwing it in, true to the book. It's funny because I saw some criticism saying, oh, it just seemed like it played out like a Curse of Strahd, but I liked how, for the most part, it was true to Curse of Strahd and Ravenloft lore. And I think the author was in a lose-lose situation, because if they make it too much like Curse of Strahd, then people say, oh, it's just like somebody's D&D campaign. But if she wasn't true to the lore, people would complain saying, oh, it's not true to the lore. So I like these little nods and moments in the thing where it's just like out of Curse of Strahd, and I would have been annoyed if it didn't honour it so closely. So good on you, author, if you're watching, which you're probably not. And then they go to Lamordia. They go to another Domain of Dread. It's not just all about Barovia. It's not just all about Strahd. That's great. It's funny because I am running a domain hopping campaign at the moment, but I have not run Lamordia, nor do I plan to. But reading about Lamordia and Heir of Strahd has made me think maybe I should include Lamordia, and I really liked how Victra Mordenheim was depicted as well. It's great for roleplay purposes, I guess, and seeing what she's like as a person and as a Dark Lord. Before they reach her, there's a cool few things that happen. One is that there are owl bears, but instead of being owls, they're ravens, so I guess raven bears. So they're black with raven heads. I thought that was amazing. And I think that's something you could probably just chuck into Barovia and Curse of Strahd and would work well. And now I'm thinking, I want a Domain of Dread. Even if I don't use the Lamordia, I might still use these owl bear raven bears in one of the other Domains of Dread. There's a moment, I think I mentioned this earlier on, where Car, the Kenku, is mistaken for a were-raven. And I wondered as well if there was ever going to be a moment where the drow elf was going to comment about how sunlight doesn't affect him, but I think he's a drow who's always lived on the surface, or mostly lived on the surface, and has adapted to sunlight anyway. I thought that'd be a cool thing where he's kind of like walking around and he's like saying, hey, sunlight doesn't affect me here. Anyway, I'm digressing. And there's a Kraken as well. And I added a Kraken when I ran the Sea of Sorrows, and I felt like a Kraken wasn't a very horror monster to include. But I feel a bit validated now because there was one in the Lamordia and one introduced there, so that's great. And Krakens are tough monsters as well, with ridiculous challenge ratings. In my game, they attacked it and it retreated. They didn't get anywhere near taking off all its HP, and it destroyed their ships, and they were stranded in shipwreck then as well. But yeah, Lamordia, I loved it. I wonder if it opens the doors to, if they plan to do more Ravenloft books in the future, and it opens the door to Darkon, Volkovnia, Valachan, other Domains of Dread. That would be so cool. And then before they return to Barovia, it's Fial's perspective. She stays there the whole time, and she meets Piddlewick too. She meets Leaf, the accountant. I love that they were included as well. And then, of course, we get the climax with the sort of big battle. Yes, I'm using quote marks for reasons I'll explain in a minute. That ends the novel. I'll be honest, I was a bit disappointed with the final battle. Strahd was... We didn't really get to see Strahd in action. Other than, from a roleplay point of view, we didn't really see him much from a combat point of view, if at all. Where was Rahadin as well, by the way? Maybe they're doing a Rahadin's Revenge thing in the Curse of Strahd ending, where as it sort of fades to black at the end of the novel after they've, defeated Strahd and sorted out Fial, that Rahadin walks in and is like, oh, what's going on? But one thing I did like about the final battle and how it played out was Tatiana having her revenge. I thought that was an interesting spin. Almost like this evil Tatiana who is standing up to her abuser and getting revenge. I thought that was an interesting spin, rather than it being sort of a classic, almost like a D&D campaign battle where Strahd's phasing through walls and throwing fireballs and things like that. One thing I wondered as well is, the author is overridden by Wizards of the Coast. Wizards of the Coast will dictate what they can and can't do. Maybe, for all we know, the author wanted a big epic battle, but Wizards of the Coast, for whatever reason, didn't want to show Strahd in battle. Maybe as potential spoilers, ruin things for people who want to play Curse of Strahd, because then, if people then know that Strahd can face through walls and all the spells he can cast, then, that's going to make it less special when they do it. Then again, with how weak he seemed in the final battle and how easily dispatched and defeated he was, that might put people off from playing Curse of Strahd. They might think, Strahd's not the cool, big bad villain I thought he was. So, I don't know, it feels like a lose-lose situation. If the ending felt a bit disappointing and weak, but if they had this huge battle with Strahd as, as per a classic Curse of Strahd campaign, then it might be giving away too much for them people who want to play Curse of Strahd. I liked the ending as well, the horror ending, where they all go back to Baldur's Gate, and it turns out that Fial still remains a vampire. She was a vampire spawn, and then she drinks Strahd's blood and becomes a full-blooded vampire, and then she tells the other lies to them, saying she's cured, and then she goes back, and her family was quite abusive to her father especially, and she just kills them all. That is a great horror ending. And then the fact as well, there's a line saying, will the other 5 bow down to me, or will I have to kill them, kind of thing. It's that whole thing of just as the other 4 party members all feel like a collective and a party and a found family, the 5th member's like, right, you're either working for me or I kill you. That's great. That is such a good horror ending. You get the fallbacks where it's a happy ever after with all the members of the party. You've got the, Road to Neverwinter and On Among Thieves, same again. But, this one couldn't do that, I don't think. It wouldn't have been a horror novel unless it had this ending. And I'm glad that the author went with this. I'm a little gutted not to have seen other Curse of Strahd locations such as Vallaki, Argynvostholt, the Amber Temple. Maybe if they do another Barovia themed novel in the future, we will. But then at the same time, I'm glad that we got to see so much of the castle. It got to the point where I think maybe we saw too much of the castle. I wouldn't say the castle got boring, but I think if they did include, if they included loads of other areas in Barovia and then they just included the castle a little bit, I'd probably be saying in this video, I'm gutted they didn't include more of the castle. So it's good that we got to see so much of the castle and so much of the castle was included. And of course the whole premise, you know, they spend most of the time in the castle. It's like Village of Barovia briefly, castle for ages, Slinker Pass very briefly, Lamordia for a bit, and then back. But yeah, maybe in a future novel we'll see more Curse of Strahd locations. Also a little gutted we didn't see people like Esmeralda and the Weathermaid Foxgrove twins, but very happy to see Van Richten, Larissa Snowmain, and some of the other, like, you know, Castle Ravenloft denizens and villains. And, you know, other people can always be introduced in another novel, I guess. I say this in the other video, but I'll expand on it. I don't know if I'd want more adventures from this group necessarily. I feel like that story is told and done. Like, how would you do a sequel with how things are going with Fjel's condition? But maybe other Domains of Dread, maybe natives from the Domains of Dread could be quite a cool angle, not necessarily from the Sword Coast or another world, although I did like that they did this for this first one. I think that's kind of true and traditional to a Curse of Strahd campaign. Maybe other Mist Wanderers. Give me Jander Sunstar, please. I'm begging you. I want Jander Sunstar. But then I bet there's people watching this who are saying, no, don't, you know, just in case it's a bad novel and it ruins the Vampire of the Mists, maybe we should leave Jander alone. But I don't know, like I said, as Weathermaid Foxgrove twins, Alan Nick Ray, there's plenty of other people that could be included. Quick sort of FAQ type thing I thought I'd best mention as well, and I did this in the other video, is it suitable for current players or would-be players of Curse of Strahd? I'm going to say no, because there's a lot of spoilers in it for Curse of Strahd, and for Ravenloft. It's a difficult one because I imagine the people reading it will then want to play Curse of Strahd, so that's a good thing. It might get them wanting to play Curse of Strahd, but then when they play Curse of Strahd, they already know lots of stuff about Strahd, Tatiana, the Tome of Strahd, how the Mists work, how the Domains of Dread work, and all things like that. So, but if you have any current players or would-be players of Curse of Strahd who want to read it, probably tell them to hold off until after you've finished your campaign. Right, in my thoughts and predictions video a few months ago before the novel came out, I had 4 predictions on what would happen in the novel. Now, in my spoiler light video, I did address these, but I couldn't really go into detail, so I'm very excited now to sort of talk about the sort of criteria and why it's a yes or a no. My first prediction was it'll be grislier than expected. Oh my god, yes. It's grislier than the cover painted, or would depict how it would go. I mean, even with the descriptions of the gore, the kinds of monsters they fight, the attitudes of the PCs not getting along, so they don't know each other, they don't trust each other, first of all. The grisliest bit I found, and it's not just me, I've seen other people talk about this, is when Fjell is turned into a vampire spawn and then has to feed, or doesn't have to, she chooses to feed on a villager who she says is just, you know, I think she's, I can't remember the exact wording, but I think she's described as being like a teenager, a young adult, like she's just barely a child or something like that. And it said her blood tastes of hope. And that's horrible. Like, that girl's probably sitting there thinking, so hopefully someone will save me before this monster kills me, but no, the monster killed her. Like, that's grisly as heck, man. Like, you know, I know it's subjective and some people might go, that's not very grisly. But I thought that was grisly. And I think the book was grislier than intended. So I'm putting a big tick in the S box for that one. My second prediction was, do any of the characters die? Yes. Technically, sort of. It's not the way I expected. I expected one would die entirely, for reasons I'll get to in a minute. You know, they're written out the story, basically. They die, and that's it. You don't hear from them or see them again. What actually happens is Fjell gets turned into a vampire spawn. So yes, technically she's dead, but she still operates as a character. But it is, you know, she's technically dead. She's undead, so I'm going to count that as a yes. But some people may say I've got that on technicality, but I'll add that tick. Thank you very much. My third prediction was, do any of the characters leave changed? Yes! Fjell returns to the Sword Coast as a vampire. I 100% got that right. And yeah, say no more. And lastly, my fourth prediction was, is Strahd fully defeated? And the answer is, well, the answer is no, he's not fully defeated, and my prediction was correct. He is defeated in the final battle, obviously, but in the sort of last chapter before, I suppose, the epilogue, but it's implied that he'll return. Van Richten makes reference to this halfway through the book, and it's talked about a few times after that. There's like a sort of notes from Van Richten after the final chapter before the epilogue, where he says, I think Strahd will return. You know, I don't think we've defeated Strahd for good, and he will come back. So, and I say this, and this is a spoiler for Curse of Strahd, but I'm assuming anyone watching this right now isn't concerned about that. in Curse of Strahd. There's that Strahd return section in the epilogue. That's what I was referring to in the predictions video, but I didn't want to say it in case that was then a spoiler for Curse of Strahd for anyone watching that. I assume anyone watching this doesn't care about spoilers for the novel, has read the novel, doesn't care about spoilers of Curse of Strahd, or knows Curse of Strahd. I meant it in terms of, yes, he's defeated, but he comes back. He's not 100% defeated, gone forever. And I was right. So it looks like all 4 of my predictions were correct, which has left me feeling really smug, because I didn't think I'd get, I thought maybe I'd get 1 or 2. I thought Grizzly had expected was a guarantee. Wasn't sure about character death and characters leaving changed and what would happen to Strahd, so I'm pretty chuffed about that. That's it for this one. I had loads of fun. I was going to say, I've had more fun doing this video than reading the book. That sounds really harsh to the novelist. But it is fun to geek out about this stuff, and I'm excited to see what people say in the comments about bits they liked in the novel. You know, what bits are you going to use for Curse of Strahd? Just to reiterate as well, I'm going to have another video coming up soon where I say 5 things you can use in Curse of Strahd from Heir of Strahd. So feel free to keep an eye out for that video. Subscribe if you haven't already. And yeah, to tell me in the comments what you thought, whether you liked it, didn't like it, especially if things like you like the old Ravenloft novels, especially if you've read some of the recent D&D novels like I have with the Fallbacks and the Honor Among Thieves tie-in novels. I've heard mixed reactions from the author, some people saying they didn't like her style, some people adore the author for some of the other stuff she's worked on, including Star Wars, but she's got her own books as well, so she's not just an IP writer where she writes for IPs like Dungeons & Dragons and Star Wars, she also writes her own stuff. And the crucial question, would you want another book in the future? I think I would. You know, hopefully this is just the start and we're going to get more Ravenloft novels in the future, like a new series following the old classics from the 90s and noughties. We'll leave it there for this one, and thank you very much for watching. Thank you, Mr. Wanderers.